New this morning, as the DOJ prepares to release more documents related to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation, the department is facing intense criticism over the slow pace of the rollout and the heavy redaction in the initial batch of files. The DOJ says it erred on the side of, quote, over-redaction to protect victims of Epstein. Yesterday, the Justice Department republished a photo taken from Epstein's home that featured an image of President Trump. It was deleted Saturday, but reappeared Sunday, with the DOJ saying it temporarily removed the picture to make sure it didn't show any victims.
Let me tell you something that should make every single American absolutely furious right now. The Department of Justice is actively covering up evidence related to Jeffrey Epstein while pretending they're protecting victims. Congress passed a law with overwhelming bipartisan support requiring full transparency on the Epstein files. That law passed the House with only one vote against it and unanimously in the Senate. The timeline was crystal clear. 30 days to release everything except material that would harm victims, compromise national security, or involve ongoing investigations. And what did the DOJ do? They're slow rolling the release.
In good faith, whether you have Clinton's name mentioned so many times, it's not about politics and who should be mentioned, who shouldn't. It's about complete accountability. The law speaks to who are the government officials and others who were named and who were not. And when you look at this, Sarah, I think it's important very briefly to look at the timeline. Everyone's Clinton, Clinton, Clinton. The reality is that Epstein, the public investigation, began in 2005, right? Clinton served 92 to 2000, and then you look at him actually being accountable in Florida, if you could call it accountability, in 2009. Some believe that he escaped justice in a very significant way. And then, of course, 2019 is ultimately when he was indicted, died a year later. And so I think that if you're going to release it, for law's sake, release it so there are not conspiracy theories. And if you're going to redact it, of course you want to redact sensitive victim information.
Over-redacting documents to the point where entire pages are blacked out and playing games by pulling down files and reposting them while claiming they need to review them more carefully. This isn't protecting victims. This is protecting powerful people who don't want the full truth about their connections to a child sex trafficker becoming public knowledge. And before anyone tries to claim this is just standard bureaucratic caution, let me be absolutely clear about what's happening here. The DOJ came to Congress back in July and said they'd been through all the Epstein documents and couldn't find any basis for bringing additional prosecutions. So they've already reviewed everything. They've already categorized it. They've already made decisions about what's relevant and what isn't, which means this slow drip release over weeks and months isn't about needing time to review materials. It's about controlling the narrative and minimizing the political damage to people they've decided to protect. And at the top of that list is Donald Trump. Congressman Jamie Raskin, the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, was asked directly whether this is a cover-up. His answer was immediate and unequivocal. Yes, this is absolutely a cover-up. He pointed out that the law only allows redactions for material involving child sexual abuse, physical abuse, ongoing investigations which the DOJ claims don't exist, and national security concerns. That's it. Those are the only legal justifications for hiding information. So how is the Justice Department blocking out entire documents? How are they redacting information that clearly doesn't fall into any of those categories? The answer is that they're violating the law that Trump himself signed because they're more interested in protecting him than following legal requirements. Let's talk about the process here because it reveals everything about what's actually happening. The DOJ released an initial batch of documents. Then they pulled down about 15 files claiming they needed to review whether any victims were depicted in photographs. One of those files was a picture showing Trump, Melania, Epstein, and Ghislaine Maxwell together. That photo wasn't new. People had seen it before. It had been public for years. But suddenly the DOJ decided it needed to be pulled down for further review. Then after their review determined there were no victims in the photo, they reposted it unchanged. Think about what that means. They pulled down a photo of Trump with Epstein and Maxwell, created uncertainty and confusion about why it was removed, and then put it back up days later claiming they were just being cautious about victim protection. But the photo didn't show any victims. It never showed any victims. Everyone knew it didn't show victims before they pulled it down. So what was the actual purpose of removing it temporarily? The purpose was to create a narrative that the DOJ is being extremely careful and protective, while simultaneously giving Trump's defenders time to craft responses and muddy the waters about what these documents actually show. This is information warfare. This is how institutions protect power. You don't outright refuse to comply with the law because that's too obvious. Instead, you comply slowly, selectively, with lots of redactions and mistakes and do-overs that create confusion and make it impossible for people to see the full picture all at once. You break the story into tiny pieces spread out over weeks, so no single revelation dominates the news cycle long enough to create sustained outrage. And you constantly emphasize victim protection, so anyone who complains about the slow pace or heavy redactions can be painted as not caring about survivors. But survivors themselves are calling this out. They're saying the DOJ has shown zero deference or respect for victims. They're saying nobody from the Justice Department consulted with them about how this release should be handled. They're saying the process is sloppy, inconsistent, and thoughtless in ways that accidentally expose victim identities while carefully protecting powerful people. These aren't critics with political axes to grind. These are the actual people who suffered at Epstein's hands, watching the Justice Department claim to be protecting them while actually protecting their abusers, and the powerful men who enabled those abusers. Republican Congressman Thomas Massie, who was one of the primary sponsors of the legislation requiring these releases, said both the letter of the law and the spirit of the law have been broken. He's calling for contempt proceedings against Attorney General Pam Bondi. He wants to build a bipartisan coalition to fine Bondi for every single day she fails to release these documents as required by law. Think about how extraordinary that is. Republicans and Democrats who agree on almost nothing these days are united in saying the Justice Department is flagrantly violating a law that passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. That should tell you something about how egregious this obstruction actually is. And here's the thing. The law itself doesn't include specific enforcement mechanisms or penalties for non-compliance, which means Congress has to get creative about how to force the Justice Department to follow the law. They're floating contempt proceedings. They're talking about impeachment. They're threatening fines and other sanctions. But all of that requires building political will and overcoming the natural reluctance to go to war with the executive branch. And in the meantime, every day that passes is another day the full truth stays hidden while the DOJ slow walks compliance and Trump's team figures out how to spin whatever comes out next. Raskin made another crucial point that destroys the DOJ's excuses. He said when asked whether the 30-day timeline was realistic, that of course it was realistic because the Justice Department told Congress back in July they'd already been through all the documents. They'd already reviewed everything. They'd already determined there was no basis for bringing additional charges. So the idea that they suddenly need months to carefully review and redact materials is complete nonsense. They've known what's in these files for months. They've had plenty of time to do proper redactions. The slow release isn't about protecting anyone. It's about controlling information flow for political purposes. And the pattern of what's being released versus what's being held back or heavily redacted makes the political nature of this obvious. Documents showing Bill Clinton with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Those came out relatively quickly with minimal redactions. Photos of Clinton in compromising social situations, released. But information about Trump's extensive travel on Epstein's plane, that took multiple document dumps to come out. Details about Trump's presence at Epstein properties with witnesses to crimes, hidden in emails that are only now surfacing, evidence that prosecutors found Trump's connections significant enough to document and investigate, buried for years. The Justice Department released a photo of Trump with Epstein and Maxwell, then pulled it down claiming victim protection concerns, then put it back up unchanged. They released documents showing Trump traveled on Epstein's plane far more than previously reported, but those documents came out slowly in later tranches rather than in the initial release. They documented a subpoena to Mar-a-Lago for records related to the Maxwell prosecution, but that information wasn't highlighted or explained in any DOJ statement. Instead, it had to be found by reporters digging through thousands of pages of files. That's not transparency. That's selective disclosure designed to minimize impact. If the Justice Department was actually committed to full transparency as the law requires, they would release everything at once in searchable databases with clear indexing so people could understand what they're looking at. They would provide context and explanation for significant findings. They would make it easy rather than difficult for the public to understand what these documents show. Instead, they're doing the opposite. They're releasing information in ways that make it as hard as possible to see the full picture. Raskin was asked whether the DOJ's actions are specifically designed to protect Donald Trump. His answer was devastating. He said, what else could explain this? The entire business model of this Justice Department is serving Trump. They're trying to reorganize the entire executive branch around the idea that it exists to serve one person. That's the unitary executive theory they're implementing. So of course they're protecting Trump in how they're releasing these documents. That's literally their purpose and their priority. Not following the law, not seeking justice for victims, not ensuring transparency and accountability, protecting Donald Trump from embarrassment or worse. Think about what that means for the rule of law. Congress passes legislation with overwhelming bipartisan support. The president signs it into law. The law has clear requirements and timelines. And then the executive branch just doesn't comply. They slow roll it. They over-redact. They play games with pulling files down and putting them back up. They violate both the letter and spirit of what Congress required. And they do all of this because following the law would be politically inconvenient for the president. That's not how democracies are supposed to function. When the executive branch can simply ignore laws it finds inconvenient. When the Justice Department can prioritize protecting the president over following legal mandates. When institutions designed to provide oversight and accountability instead provide cover and obstruction. You don't have a functioning system of checks and balances anymore. You have something much closer to authoritarianism, where power protects power and the rules only apply to people without connections. Raskin also made an important point about Trump's own position on this legislation. Trump opposed it until the very end, when he could see it was going to pass with veto-proof margins. Only then did he pivot to saying he supported full transparency. He signed the bill into law. But now his Justice Department is doing everything possible to obstruct the implementation of that law. So Trump gets to claim he supported transparency, while his own administration ensures transparency doesn't actually happen. That's having it both ways. That's political theater designed to give him cover while protecting him from accountability. When Raskin was asked about photos of Bill Clinton with Epstein and Maxwell, his response was perfect. He said he has no idea what Clinton's involvement was, and that's exactly why we need full transparency. He pointed out that Epstein was a socialite and a panderer who cultivated relationships with powerful people across society. Lots of people appear in photos with him. Some of those people might have been involved in criminal activity. Some might just have been at events where Epstein was present. We shouldn't be covering up for anyone, regardless of party affiliation. We should want the full truth about everyone who was connected to this operation. That's the right position. This shouldn't be partisan. Republicans shouldn't be protecting Trump. Democrats shouldn't be protecting Clinton. Everyone should want full transparency about who was involved with Jeffrey Epstein, what they knew, what they did, and whether they enabled or participated in his crimes. The fact that we're not getting that transparency, the fact that the Justice Department is actively obstructing legal requirements to release information, tells you that powerful people across the political spectrum have things they don't want exposed. But here's what makes the current situation especially galling. Democrats are calling for full release. Progressive Democrats like Raskin are demanding complete transparency, even though they know Clinton's name and photo appear in these files. They're saying, release everything, let the chips fall where they may. We want accountability regardless of whose reputation gets damaged. Meanwhile, Trump and his Justice Department are obstructing the release of information while claiming to support transparency. They're violating the law to protect Trump while accusing their critics of playing politics. Raskin also pushed back on Republican hypocrisy about this. He pointed out that he personally wrote multiple letters and held hearings about Alex Acosta and the sweetheart deal Epstein got in Florida back when Trump was president. He was demanding accountability then. He was asking hard questions then. So Republicans trying to claim Democrats only care about this now that Trump is back in office are lying. The evidence of Raskin's oversight work is documented in public. He was trying to expose the double system of justice that let Epstein escape serious punishment in 2008 while Trump was in office the first time. And that double system of justice is exactly what we're seeing play out again now. Epstein was convicted in 2008 on state charges after federal prosecutors abandoned a 60-count federal indictment that would have exposed his entire operation and everyone involved in it. Alex Acosta, who later became Trump's labor secretary, gave Epstein a deal that protected Epstein and his co-conspirators from federal prosecution. That deal was itself a cover-up designed to prevent the full truth from coming out. And now we're watching a similar cover-up happen in real time as the Justice Department obstructs full disclosure of what they found when they finally did investigate Epstein's operation properly. The question Raskin raised is the right one. How did a global, decades-long, billion-dollar sex trafficking ring go undetected and unpunished for so long? More importantly, how many powerful people knew about it and either participated or looked the other way? And why are our institutions still protecting those people, even after Epstein's death and Maxwell's conviction? Those are the questions that should drive this investigation. Those are the questions the Epstein files should answer. But we can't get those answers if the Justice Department keeps obstructing the release of information that might implicate people they've decided to protect. Congress is now considering whether to sue the Justice Department to force compliance with the law. But as Raskin pointed out, the legal questions about standing are complicated. Individual members of Congress or the minority caucus face hostile court rules about whether they have legal standing to bring such suits. Speaker Johnson would have clear standing to sue on behalf of the full House of Representatives. But will he do that? Will Republican leadership actually go to war with a Republican president's Justice Department to force transparency about Epstein files that likely contain damaging information about Trump? Or will they find reasons to slow walk their own enforcement efforts while claiming to support transparency? My bet is on the latter, because that's how the system protects itself. Republicans will make noise about demanding full release. They'll criticize the DOJ's pace. They'll threaten contempt and litigation. But when it comes to actually following through with real consequences, they'll find excuses. They'll say they're working through legal issues. They'll claim they're building bipartisan consensus. And in the meantime, more time passes, public attention moves on to other issues, and the full truth stays buried under redactions and slow-rolled releases and institutional obstruction. That's how accountability dies in America, not through some dramatic conspiracy, but through bureaucratic resistance and elite solidarity and a collective decision that some truths are too dangerous to expose, through institutions that are supposed to provide oversight instead providing cover, through laws that get passed with great fanfare but never get enforced, through political leaders who claim to support transparency right up until transparency might actually hurt people they're protecting. The Epstein files should have been released in full within 30 days as the law required. Every document that doesn't involve child sexual abuse material, active harm to victims, or genuine national security concerns should be public right now. Instead, we're getting a slow drip of carefully managed information with heavy redactions and constant delays. And the Justice Department has made clear through their actions that they care more about protecting Donald Trump than following the law or serving justice. That should outrage everyone. Republicans who claim to care about the rule of law should be demanding Pam Bondi's resignation for flagrantly violating congressional mandates. Democrats should be filing lawsuits and using every procedural tool available to force compliance. And the American people should be flooding congressional offices, demanding that someone, anyone, actually enforce the law that was passed to ensure transparency about one of the most significant criminal investigations of our time. Because if we let this slide, if we allow the Justice Department to just ignore laws it finds inconvenient, if we accept that powerful people can obstruct transparency about their connections to sex traffickers, then we're admitting we don't actually have a justice system that applies equally to everyone. We're admitting that wealth and power and political connections are enough to escape accountability no matter what you've done. And once we admit that, once we accept that as normal, there's no going back. The system is broken, and we've decided we're fine with it staying broken as long as it's not our guy getting protected. That's not good enough. That's not acceptable. And if you believe in actual justice rather than selective justice based on political convenience, then you should be furious about what the DOJ is doing right now. You should be demanding full immediate release of every document as the law requires. You should be supporting contempt proceedings against Pam Bondi. And you should be making clear that obstruction of legally mandated transparency is disqualifying for anyone involved in it, regardless of party affiliation. Because anything less is just accepting that we live in a system where the powerful protect the powerful and the rest of us get whatever scraps of truth they decide to let us have.